discussion this morning was very interesting because they started talking about ethics and tourism and sustainable tourism. It reminds me of a little girl whose daddy was a lawyer, and she said, "Daddy, what's ethics?" And he says, "Come here, darling, sit on my knee, let's talk." He said, "If I have a little client who's a little old lady, and I charge her $10,000, and she pays me $100,000, ethics is whether I tell my partner or not." But this sort of applies to the tourism and sustainable tourism thing as well, because a lot of people really don't know what they're doing, so you have to help them a little bit. You have to give them a little bit of an ethical shove, and you also always have to keep in mind the importance of a moral imperative. For example, this idiot was going to build a completely unsustainable resort. The thing is that if you walk away, then you're enabling that idiot to build this resort. So somehow you have to come back into it and do something to stop him from doing it. I call it guerrilla architecture in a sense. You've basically got to try and build something stealthily which gives the local people some form of hope and income, while at the same time dealing with this other person. Because if you look at a person who's about to walk off a cliff, the question is not, do you stop them? It's a moral imperative. Of course you have to stop them. And as we discussed, if there's an idiot trying to build something which is terribly destructive of the culture and of the environment, then you have to stop them, one way or t'other. Simple. Because as they always keep saying, all it takes for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. So I think these are some of the issues which keep popping up, and I think we have to approach it in that sense. For example, me, I hate inappropriate aid. I'm in the aid business. I'm from a small island called Samoa. Not the last tsunami, but about 10 years ago we had a hurricane, and I was watching at the airport as these airplanes land from New Zealand and Australia, and they were filled with blankets and egg powder. We really needed blankets because after the hurricane, the temperatures plunged from 96 degrees Fahrenheit to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So that was very useful. As for the egg powder, this was a source of great wonder. We never quite knew what it was for, so we figured that if you mixed it with salt water, it made a really good glue for baseball bats. So that was wonderful. So we all played baseball and softball for as long as we could until the Prime Minister, according to Time magazine, we actually made Time magazine because of inappropriate aid. Time magazine said that Prime Minister Mataafa, in the harshest decree of his 3-year reign, banned baseball on all days except Wednesdays and Saturdays so that Samoans could carry on their cleanup of their particular country. So we've been looking for a while to get aid into a place where it's completely useful. Aid now is in a position which I call the missionary position, which is, just lie there, you'll enjoy whatever you get, and thank God afterwards. We have to get away from that. So we've been looking at ways of making aid much more appropriate. And it's right there under our nose. You discussed it this morning. Tourism. It's one of the most destructive things on the planet. But if used responsibly and sustainably, tourism is the most potent development tool that we have. Think about it. Tourism is the world's largest industry now. It's bigger than oil, and it produces over 10% of the world's GDP and most of the jobs. So what a few of us have been doing is we're looking at using tourism sustainably as a development tool. Because what it is, it's a lot of money. It is the largest voluntary transfer of resources from the haves to the have-nots in history. And it's voluntary. Think about it. Think about the hundreds of millions of people who have lost their lives trying to hang on to their moolah or trying to wrench what they needed to feed their families of somebody else. Imagine. So it's the real industry of peace as well. So what we look at is we look at using tourism in a sustainable fashion to benefit the people who have been getting so much rubbish aid over the years. So Sustainable tourism has very simple rules. First of all, there has to be a significant local ownership. I didn't say controlling, I said significant local stakeholder in the property you're building. It has to be non-harmful of the ecology, and it has to benefit the locals either in health, education, culture, or otherwise. That's sustainable tourism. Now, I work with National Geographic, and we talk about geotourism, which takes it one step higher, which means that geotourism is tourism which enhances or improves health, education, culture, welfare, and livelihoods of the destinations. That's where we're at now. So it's very simple. You know, you can recite it now. Sustainable tourism, geotourism has few very simple rules. But it's like safe sex. You break one, and you're dead. These rules, we tell investors or potential investors in properties, if these rules are not followed, do not even dream of investing. Countries in different parts of the world, thanks to the United Nations World Tourism Organization, are adopting geotourism and sustainable tourism rules as part of investment spheres. Banks now understand it in the developing world. So it's changing. It's changing very, very quickly. And also we use it as a means of reconnecting people to their culture. For example, with National Geographic and the Inter-American Development Bank, we signed what's known as the Mundo Maya Sustainable Tourism Project, which looks at the 4 Central American countries plus the southern part of Mexico to use tourism, sustainable tourism, as a means of getting wealth and livelihoods to the Indians, the Maya, in the rural areas. The problem was that the Castilian elites who ran the cities didn't like the idea of giving money to the Maya, because it was like giving money to the guerrillas. So we had to do a deal. So we told the bank, listen, don't give the Castilian elites any money until they agree to give Indians, Mayans, sustainable income as well. So that's how we did it. So the rich people in the cities, they got the money to develop the roads and infrastructure they needed, and the Mayans got the support they needed to rebuild their lives again. You know, close to 100,000 Maya were killed during the war in Guatemala, and that war only ended in, you know, about 10 years ago. So what we had to do as well as not only were we developing them, we had to reconnect the Maya with their ancient heritage. For example, they would look at a Mayan pyramid and they think, it's just a pile of rocks that gringos like. If we chop a bit off, we can make a lot of money, and who cares? So to stop that, we had to reintroduce them to the glories of the ancient history so they could enjoy the benefits of their modern history as tourism started to build. So we worked with them to build community-level tourism and village-based tourism throughout the Mayan world. So this is another important way that the tourism, if worked properly, can benefit people in the communities and also give people a leg up. We also used working with a person called Arthur Demarest, who is the model for Indiana Jones. I call him my archaeoloco, but he's very, very good because he launched a thing called ethical archaeology. You know, normally when you see archaeologists coming down to Central America, usually it's someone from the Ivies or whatever with about 100 listen blonde PhD candidates there, and they all fall in love with a pot-bellied guy called Juan, and they wonder why Juan doesn't want to go back to Massachusetts. But, so we struck a deal with the architects, with the archaeologists. We said, so instead of bringing down 100 listen people from the East Coast, why don't you just bring 50 down and train 50 local women in Guatemala, Mayan women. At the time, there was only one PhD, female PhD Mayan at the time. This is in 2005. So thanks to Arthur Demarest and all the ethical archaeology, they did do that. Now we have about 200 female PhD Mayans in Guatemala because of ethical archaeology. And it's my dream, while my knees still hold up, to dance at the inauguration of the first female Mayan president of Guatemala. Could come a lot quicker than we think. But there again, you use tourism in a sustainable fashion to build up ancient cultures and allow them the dignity of designing for themselves the lives that they would really like for themselves and their families. Now, aerial highways, that's on the program. So in the 18 minutes I have left, aerial highways, now the thing is that transportation systems in Africa, South America, and the other sort of former colonial territories were designed by colonial powers to get the resources as quickly as possible from the south to the capitals of the north. So this, I mean, people who travel in Africa, you realize that if you go from East Africa to West Africa, quite often, most often, you have to go through Brussels, Paris, Frankfurt, London. You have to go through the colonial capitals. This is because that's why they were designed, to get the resources of the colonies up to the boutiques of the colonial powers in Europe. So it's a real disincentive to development. For example, Ethiopian Airlines made money, made $110 million last year, mainly because it's an African airline and it focuses going east to west, Lagos, Addis, and they make a lot of money from that because this is what Africans want to do. They'd rather go east-west rather than going north-south. So we designed this thing called aerial highways in the sense that recognizing the power of airlines and to bring tourists into the developing world and also to take out the goods and services to the global markets. Because if you cannot take your goods and services out to the global markets, then you remain a pretty stagnant backwater in the global economy. So it's very important for development. Cash in with the tourists, goods and services out. So we have been talking about aerial highways, recognizing the value of highways as an integral part of the infrastructure. Now, what's infrastructure? So my favorite description of infrastructure is a Chilean economist who was nominated for the Nobel. He said that infrastructure is basically a means of sharing the wealth. That's what infrastructure is for us, and that's why we look at aerial highways, airlines, as a way of sharing the wealth. Now, the United States government spends close to $300 million a year subsidizing airlines to places you've never heard of in the United States because they recognize the value of airlines as a means of sharing the wealth. Otherwise, these places will be complete backwaters. So we've been promoting this whole idea of aerial highways as a means of getting development into the poorer countries. Now, we also designed it so that we look at the ecological footprint of peoples in a destination and work out this versus the damage and the income to that particular area. So that we're looking at the World Bank subsidizing aerial highway systems in working very closely with the UN Environment Program to ensure that it is sustainable over the longer period of time. So this is something we're starting to move on at the moment to recognize the fact that we have to keep this infrastructure, this aerial infrastructure afloat because the ground-based transportation systems were designed in colonial times and not to serve the people of Africa or South America, but the colonial powers. So this is something we'll probably start hearing more and more of as we move forward. But tourism also is interesting because it gives us one huge potential. It gives us the potential to use people-to-people development. Imagine you and your family, 2.3 kids, if you got on an airplane, you would select a country to go to, which was one, climate friendly. There are people who do these indices, and ecologically sound, and where you know your tourism dollars would help. Surely you do that once every 3 trips, right? We're trying to make that possible because for the first time in history, we can get people to determine where they go to help and who they're going to help rather than the government. Because the government has different criteria for determining who gets assistance, whether it's our dictators or their dictators, and to hell with the people in between. So this is very, very much on the cards now, and I think that keep in mind the fact that American tourists take and leave more cash in Costa Rica than the American government gives in aid. American tourists take and leave more cash in most countries on the planet than the US Agency for International Development ever gives in aid. So this is the potential of tourism that's there, and it's right there with you. So I'm just saying that, I mean, look at countries recovering from tsunami, the little country called Samoa. If we got 50,000 tourists to move in there, stay, pick up a shovel if they like, it would make a huge difference. The economy would bounce back. If I could get 63,000 tourists into Ethiopia in the next year, Ethiopia will meet its economic Millennium Development Goals. It's like that right throughout the world. And the thing is, it's in your hands for the first time ever. Instead of kvetching about the government misusing your money, your taxes, think about it. You can now make a difference because you, as a people, can go and help other people as well. And this is the great opportunity that we have by looking at the power of tourism and what can be done. So, we're proposing that the government, remember the Cash for Clunkers program? Wasn't that great? We're proposing that the government gives $1,000 coupons to anybody who takes a trip to anywhere in the developing world, which is also climate friendly. What do you reckon? These are some things that we'll be doing because you'll spend $1,000, you'll give it to some poor, struggling American airline, but you'll be taking your spouse, your 2.3 kids to a country which is really going to appreciate your being there. And there are lots of non-governmental organizations working, along with the people I work with, to make sure that this type of trip that you take will be a trip of a lifetime and make a huge difference to the people that will host you. So isn't that fun? Hotels, Green Globe International certifies all hotels for being green and for being good. Now we have the climate-friendly indices as well on top of it. So remember that when looking for properties and for airlines. And we're going to do it with airports as well. So we're on the verge of all of you being really good development people for the next, I don't know, as long as you like. So when in history have you been given a chance to go to somewhere warm, where there's probably beaches, and do some good? I'll leave you with that thought. It's bloody cold outside.